Good morning. Welcome to the webinar this morning. This is a project update relating to advanced work packaging and more specifically information mapping to support that. Um, to make sure that you're able to hear this, could one of you send me a question? It's in the, it should be on your screen. At the lower half of your screen, there's a window there for questions. So if someone could type in a question to acknowledge that you're hearing this, that'd be great. Oh, volume's low. That's great. Okay, well, good. So, all right, so we'll move the microphone around and hopefully you can see the title screen. And anyway, we'll start. So my name is Reg Hunter. I'm with Fiatech. I'm a senior project director at Fiatech. Many of you have been involved in advanced work packaging. We'll show you some information about the folks that have registered for this webinar. Um, Many of you have been involved in some preliminary discussions that we've been having on this project that we launched. And so welcome to the webinar today. And I hope you are able to see the path that we're going and roll your sleeves up and get involved with us. So with respect to some of the demographics, 83 people have signed up for this webinar. What's really nice about it is that of those 83 people, about 43 or so indicated that they would be receptive to the idea that once you reached a certain point on this advanced information mapping effort, that they would be able to perhaps support some validation testing. 55 folks within the 83 have direct experience in work packaging. 51 have ongoing work packaging activities going on, and then about 50 are members of Fiatech. And what to me is nice about this breakdown is that when you get close to the subject matter experts, you're able to essentially achieve much better performance and advance the project in an organized way where it benefits the industry. So that's great. One of the things that we talked about during a workshop that we had after the post-conference meeting in San Antonio was that we recognize that work packaging is very important to both to the industry as a whole, but there's certain distinctions that take place between industrial and commercial, and so there's actually sort of a parallel path that's going on with respect to, is this an industrial work packaging effort or is this a commercial? And so the breakdown on that is 67 are industrial and 16 are commercial of the 83. So hopefully on your screen, you'll see a pane, a window on the right-hand side. You can reduce it to see the full screen by clicking on the right arrow key at the top left-hand corner, or you can expand it. You also can essentially send in questions, which you see pretty much close to the bottom where the four X's are, and you can issue a question and you can designate who you want the question to go to and say, this is going to be an environment for us to track your interests in certain areas and associate your interests specifically to you so we avoid confusion. Preferably, rather than sending it to everybody, I'd recommend sending it to the organizer and our organizer and presenter, which is two pull down options that you have on the two part. Okay. So what this really represents is an opportunity to input your information in runtime comments. So if something's confusing that Ted's talking about, or if you want some more clarification or something like that, you can go ahead and type it in. We're at the Shell facility here in Houston, and we can see your comments, and we'll interrupt Ted with your question if we think that it's important for the clarity, or we'll address that when we have more of the discussion later on in the webinar. It's also the environment that, again, that we use in order to allow you to designate which areas you're more specifically interested in participating going forward. With respect to that, though, if you're interested in something and you have a slide that caused your interest, then if you could indicate what slide number, which is in the upper right-hand corner, that you're talking about, that would be helpful as well. Now, one of the last things, and you need to jot this down because the number won't be available after this page, but if you look at the top of the page, you'll see a phone number. This is a Shell-provided phone number for you to call in. Halfway through the conference call, we're going to have a discussion, an open forum type discussion. And so the number that you can use to be able to participate in that is the 713-222-0377. and you use the conference ID as you see there. Okay, so hopefully you're able to have a pencil there and jot that number down, because you can call in now, you're welcome to, but right now all the lines are muted just to be able to let Ted get through the presentation. So hopefully that's clear. From a safety moment standpoint, one of the things that people know FIATEC for is advancing new systems and technologies. And from a safety standpoint, you have many companies employing different technologies and having the workforce adopt using it and becoming familiar with it. And there's a strong potential from a risk standpoint that someone will be walking around a construction site and so enamored with their iPad or whatever tool they're using, their tablet PC, that they'll stop being sensitive to the vehicles and activities that are surrounding them. And so keep in mind that during your training and adoption and your pilot testing with respect to new technologies, that safety still needs to win the day. And no matter how interesting the technology is, the employee really needs to focus on safety. This is in the slides that were provided to you already. I'm not going to read through it, but what's interesting and nice about FIATEC is they have a framework to deal and a policy to deal with antitrust. And so what's nice about FIATEC is that multiple owners and EPCs all can get together and set aside their company's hats, put on FIATEC hats, and talk about what are the challenges our industry faces and what are the ways to essentially improve productivity in our industry as a whole. But just the takeaway here is that you can't talk about things like cost, you can't disparage particular suppliers and things like that. It's really more driven on how do we make the industry better as a community. We had a meeting, we had a conference in San Antonio, and in the conference we had a post-conference meeting that related to this project, and the names kind of changed, but during the meeting we spent probably about two to three, actually more than that, probably 4 hours talking about, what is information mapping and what is work-face planning and what is the challenges we face and how do we go about addressing it. And it was a very active and productive conversation. It became real clear that we had to get our arms around it a little bit tighter and be much more systematic and structured in defining what this project's about. So we're fortunate that we had Martin Swain agree to lead this effort. He's with Shell, Terry Earhart on Hatch to deal with the industrial side, and Jarrett Knox on Kaiser Permanente for the commercial and institutional. As you'll see in the slides coming up, this isn't in a vacuum. We're actually interacting with CII and to some extent Contractors Association of Alberta. Is that what they call it?
Construction Owners Association of Alberta.
Construction Owners Associations of Alberta. They've been very interested and very involved in trying to make sure that projects are performed more effectively and efficiently. And so Bill O'Brien, who's been working with CII, and he also works, he's a professor at UT, been working with CII and COA as well as FIATEC, has been interacting with everybody, and so he acts as our liaison. Ted Blackman with ConstructX is our technical lead, and I'm Reg Hunter and our project support staff. On the right-hand side, you see the folks that participated in the meeting and indicated an interest in becoming actively involved in the project. Okay. So from a timeline standpoint, we had an initial kickoff webinar. It's available on the FIATEC site for anyone who wants to go, and Ted made this presentation to help you people understand what the challenges are relating to work-face planning and installation work packaging and all those kinds of things. We generated a project plan, which is almost totally outdated now, that we have to revise. And then we had the post-conference workshop that I already talked about. And so after the post-conference workshop, we went about replanning the AIM project so that it could deliver things in a more systematic way. And so where we are now is we're having a project team meeting, obviously webinar, and from that we will revise the project plan and we'll form sub-teams in order to drive out phase one information in advance of our members meeting, which is going to occur in October on the 7th in Colorado. Okay. So if you see any questions. Okay. So with respect to the agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to provide you an update from when we had the workshop at the conference. We're also going to give you a breakdown structure that are logically organized in partitions objectives and to enable better high-performance sub-teams to be formed. We'd like to reach consensus on expectations and deliverables and priorities and what we want to do and what really provides meaningful benefits to the industry as a whole. We'd like to know who would be the leads and participants in the different sub-teams, and who are the subject matter resources, which is why I pointed out the people that have signed up for this conference. It's very promising because by and large, most of you have a vested interest to make sure that this is successful. We're going to discuss the development approach for that defines incremental tasks and milestones necessary. So what we want to do is we want to get the sub-teams sort of straw-manned out and then talk about how do we go about approaching each sub-team in order to make the deliverables. So this is a little bit of a mission impossible thing given that we only have 2 hours, but I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to shoot for in our agenda. And then we'll talk about milestones and timelines. So again, this isn't in a vacuum. We are essentially linked into other initiatives that are worrying and concerned about advanced work packaging and industry initiatives. And so it's a collaborative approach. My last slide. So from a motivation standpoint, there's many documents, and this was one that struck me as the most interesting. Installation work packaging is essentially the kitting and aggregation of information and materials to hand over in a block of work to a crew to be able to go execute it during installation, and it needs to be as comprehensive and complete as possible. Anytime the crew has idle time, you can say they aren't being efficient, but the problem could also be is that they don't have sufficient information and they're waiting on guidance from engineering or someone else, or the material's not available, or the information's ambiguous. Okay, and so there was a study that was conducted by CII where they determined that in a normal workday, if you looked at the direct work that the craft employee is providing, it's just a little bit over 2 hours, and then the rest of the time is spent dealing with the attributes that you see above that on the bar chart. And so from a benefit standpoint, clearly you have to be able to provide a complete comprehensive documentation package and all the materials and organize all the equipment needed in order to do the installation before you can start trying to drive that time interval from a little bit over 2 hours to much more than that. So having said all that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Ted now and have Ted talk.
Sure, thanks, Reg. And I'm just going to jump back to the previous,
left, right.
Okay, jump back to the previous slide real quickly to emphasize that, you know, if we do this right, and again, it's a broader industry initiative, but if we're able to shift a significant portion of that waiting time and a significant portion of that travel time down into the direct work, look at that slide, you'd almost think you could double the productivity. It's a scary thought. It's an exciting thought from my perspective, but you know, there's significant waiting and travel time there that is highly inefficient. And you know, this is one of the deliverables that have come out of, or one of the artifacts, I should say, that has come out of the joint COA-CII effort. This diagram showing the concept of advanced work packaging and how work-face planning docks within it. So work-face planning really hits directly the field work itself, where the work-face needs to do work and they need to have things in front of them. If you chunk it down to small enough bite-sized chunks into packages, you can benefit it. But the difference between work packaging and work-face planning may be best thought of as, well, work-face planning makes sure that those work packages are executable before the field's doing them. So the field's not sitting there trying to rip apart work packages or figure out what to do. Instead, they're given a work package that has already gone through a constraint check to say this work can be executed, and hence you shouldn't be waiting. The worker should be getting to it. And actually, if you're doing it right, there should be a backup work package that's also 100% constraint-free and completely independent of the other one. So for whatever reason you may not have predicted, that one that you had as your primary work package wasn't executable. Every crew's got another one sitting right there to say, we'll go to work on this immediately. So there may be some shifting. And if you do that right, that's great. But again, coming back to the point of COA and CII, Todd, did we lose the slides?
No.
I'll keep talking while the next slide comes up. So coming back to advanced work packaging, one of the things that is COA, the Construction Owners of Alberta Association, got involved with CII, it became, well, it's not just a problem in the field. And if you don't make the problem a project-wide problem and get engineering and procurement and the early project involved in the development and support not only of the installation work packages, but also the engineering work packages and which is the EWPs and the construction work packages, you often have I'd say, unpredictable success on whether or not the installation work packaging goes well or not. And so looking at it at a broader framework and also introducing in the set of tools to make that happen. So moving on to the next slide. Todd, can you advance it for me?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Apologize for
No,
the
you can
technical
do it.
challenges.
No, you can do it.
So this is just a backup, and it kind of represents a lot of what we said. Some of the slides are going to be represented as backup. It assumes we've gone through it. So let's move on to the next one. And this is another one of the artifacts that have come out. And it's important to note as well that the Joint Committee, CII-COA Committee, will be presenting their results at two major industry events coming up. One is the CII annual conference near the end of July. They'll be presenting their results. And then there's another COA-sponsored conference up in Calgary in September that is specifically focused on workplace planning. So they'll actually get into greater levels of detail at the COA one. But this diagram that's shown here is the summary version of a very detailed work process model that the committee has developed, where they've broken it down into three major stages: stage 1, 2, and 3, going from, and different segments of the industry may call it different things, so they've kind of made the terms a little generic, where stage 1 is, before you even get into the detailed engineering, you're in the concept and early front-end loading stages of the project, where, again, you should be committing to the work phase planning approach and getting the systems organized, getting the areas organized, getting your EWPs and CWPs defined before engineering ever begins. So it kind of flips the problem on its head, which the industry's done a pretty decent job of, but it says really get construction involved in that process early and make sure that your CWPs are clear and that engineering is going to be sensitive and driven by those construction work package sequences. And then as you get into the detailed, so much of what we're going to do in terms of this project is also identify various work process aspects related to the technical support of advanced work packaging and correlate it to these stages and phases as well. Another major artifact that's come out of the joint initiative is delineating the types of packages. And so, whenever you talk about a work package and then get into the different categories of engineering to construction to installation, et cetera, you generally break them down along trade boundaries. And so there's a whole collection of work packages, and COA, CII have gone through and defined what should be in a work package. What consists of a work package. And of course, it's a guide. It's not a mandate. Every company, every project needs to take that and come up with, well, what do they consider a work package? And from my personal practical experience, I've seen that sometimes you only may be doing advanced work packaging in a select number of trades. So depending upon the project, you may not try to do work packaging across them all. And there's generally the concept of a walk, crawl, run mentality, where COA and CII have also defined that. They've defined a maturity matrix. It says, well, where is your contractors? Where is your project team? Where is the owner in terms of adoption of advanced work packaging? Because again, you don't want to try to burn the ocean with this and jump in and think you're going to do it all at once. And so, but clearly defining the work packages along trade boundaries makes sense. There's a whole other set of backup slides I'm not going to present here, but they're included in the deck for your reference, which is a set of work packaging recommendations produced by the committee. And it's important to note, again, relative to our project, they don't get into the technical details of it, which is, I think, one of the areas of collaboration that our group and our project can really add into it is, where does the technology come into play? But they certainly did highlight in terms of not only benefits, but particularly barriers. That one of the challenges among a number of challenges are that, there's not a single application that's going to support the entire work packaging process. And even if there was, the reality is that you're going to have multiple contractors that have independent systems that need to participate in it. So the idea that one single application, so the advanced work packaging really drives the necessity to have improved communication between software tools and the information being put into them and the information coming out of them. And to date, it's kind of an art. I think that it's going to hopefully rapidly move towards a science, and that's what we're about. And so we've emphasized on this slide where the barrier was existing tools don't support protocols to enable information sharing. Well, I don't think it's just the sharing. I believe it's more a matter of do we actually have a good definition of what are the requirements? You know, what needs to be shared? And again, it may not be overly prescriptive, but even as a template example that then projects and companies can use and say, well, I need to modify this for what works for me. There's really not a good reference model anywhere of what information needs to go where. And even within organizations, I've often seen in some of the best successful companies using work-based planning, that knowledge may not make it from project to project, where one project has a good example, another project doesn't. And furthermore, particularly where some of that information needs to be supplied by a partner on the project, you can definitely see it start to break down. So even if a company develops a successful work-based planning model with another partner company, they move into another project environment and suddenly there's a different contractor involved. It may have been over the years honed to work within that ecosystem, but suddenly it moves into another environment and there's not a contractual deliverable that says, here's the information that's needed to be provided. It can quickly break down. And then you put an investment into utilizing software tools to help the work packaging process, and often the tools get blamed, when in reality there's lack of clarity. So I think that getting our effort and our purpose is to be able to get some clarity to that. And so this kind of represents the convergence of information and systems that's needed to support the work packaging process, bringing that information together such that the implementations of advanced work packaging can be robust and highly repeatable. So that through our project, we will identify what information is needed where, what are the type of applications that either consume or produce that information. And that's a challenge, because again, it's not that there's just one source of information. This slide, without going through every single individual bullet point, this slide shows the type of systems and applications that are typically utilized on a project that have some level of participation in the advanced work packaging process. You can see right here, it's more than a dozen. I've got two hands up here in the room going, well, I got probably 8 to 10 on one side and 8 to 10 on another. And as you count the number of systems that need to be involved, and maybe not all of them are on every project, but again, it represents kind of a kitchen soup of things that are happening on the upper right-hand corner. And the challenge, this is again a backup slide that then just further provides detail into the specific types of applications that support this. And by the way, this is a starting point for one of the major deliverables on our project. We want to flesh this out further and actually hopefully take it to not just be applications, but our approach to it saying, well, how do we figure it out? And if we take the approach of work packaging, which is kind of what we thought of post-workshop, is let's break it down into bite-sized chunks. Just like the work packaging process on projects breaks it down into bite-sized chunks, can we break the problem down into bite-sized chunks and not just look at the balls as an application, because it gets a little overwhelming if you just think, well, this application needs all this stuff and it produces all this stuff. You're somewhat back into a difficult problem. Break it down to where this ball would represent a specific function and purpose of where somebody's using an application on a project. So it's more the functional subset of an application type that's being done to accomplish some task. So it should, again, coming back to the CII COA material, it should support some work process where some application is being used, and that application requires information as an input, and it's going to produce information. And then through our project, we want to look at, are there already standards that exist that can help us in this area? But I'm a firm believer that even if there's not some well-developed industry standard, it shouldn't stop us from documenting and saying, well, this is the information that's needed. And it may not require an industry standard to make it successful. In fact, I know from practical experience that it doesn't. But if we can get this documented and really understand the type of information with clear definition of attributes, columns, and examples of data, and then what's being produced, and then put that into a library. So instead of just a big reference of all this stuff's needed, get it down into bite-sized chunks that can be utilized by projects to support the work phase planning and advanced work packaging process. I see there's a question that in terms of the CII COA conferences and the upcoming reports, and we will follow up to provide links to those specific conferences. But continuing on this concept, okay, so breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, you may think of this as our EWP/CWP level. This is going to be our broader area. So in terms of our larger work packages, not the installation work packages, we've taken a first pass to say, hey, there's maybe 6 major categories of where applications are being utilized. And there's going to be lots of lines between them, right? And so I didn't clutter this slide up with between the lines. So I thought of this not only as, in a sense, the phases, but it's of a project. You could almost see it. It follows the life cycle of a project per se. Was our approach to say, well, hey, let's categorize the information usages in terms of these different major categories going. And the more, again, we can line it up directly into the COA model of, well, where is, not just within stage 1, but there's actually, in terms of the COA CII model, again, detailed work process diagrams that show an activity happening. As we define our modular chunks, we should better relate it to those specific boxes that are outlined in the CII COA model in terms of here's a work process activity, here's where the application supporting it, and have a correlation between the two so that we're not developing a model that's inconsistent with what the industry standard best practice for advanced work packaging is. And so for this presentation, we felt, well, hey, let's go through an example of one of these. And we've also developed a list, and this is one of the major inputs from our group here assembled that we're hoping to get feedback on. And so I'm not going to walk through each one of these in detail, but I do want to give it some level of coverage and not trivialize it. This is a major aspect of what we've done since the FIATEC conference. What we've done over the past 2 months was really go through and say, let's break it down into the bite-sized chunks where we could not try to tackle the whole problem, but start to tackle pieces of the problem. And just for simplicity, we may want to go back and change it, but I lumped engineering and fabrication together. It may not have been a good thing, and we could always debate whether or not we come back to that. So, but again, the point I was making is we're looking for input. Do you think that there's functional uses that are missing here? And some of that may come through the evolution of the project itself. So the engineering and fabrication, I see it largely as a one-way flow, although we shouldn't really say that's true because the more, again, the CWPs are defined, but at least what AIM 1.0 represents is until you have good engineering information. And a major thing that I learned personally over the past 15 years is you don't get all of that out of your prime engineering contractors. A lot of that information in terms of what's being built ends up coming from the fabricators. That's why I lumped those two together. I mean, the pipe spooling and the structural detailing is often not done by the prime contractor. And that structural detailing part pervades across industry sectors. Whether you go into the commercial, industrial sector, et cetera, you'll find that usually it's a still detailer that's determining the piece mark information, the structural piece marks that's needed to support installation work packaging. So until you get those fabricators on board with delivering that detailed engineering data, again, things can fall apart and you don't get success. So I did an initial breakdown of that into 5 major categories of information on the engineering basis, and much of the content of what goes into a work package is going to come from that. And as you go through the outline of packages, your drawings, your component lists, et cetera, has to be driven from the engineering and fabrication data. In all honesty, I think that can be further refined in terms of feedback flows back into engineering and fabrication, saying here's the sequencing, et cetera. So please don't consider this list by any means completely done. It was a great first pass at saying here's the chunks that we want to break it down into. Similarly, looking at the supplier logistics and site materials, and that category definitively becomes perhaps one of the highest blamed constraints of why work can't be done in the field. And so, focusing in on the relationship between material delivery and the installation work packages should be one of our high priority areas. Additionally, into that, the alignment of schedule and cost information. Whenever I'm talking about schedule as well, let's emphasize that there's different levels of schedule. You get to your level 1, level 2, level 3, where you're still interacting in a CPM scheduling tool. Getting that lined up with the engineering data is a non-trivial process. It's gotten far better. So just the areas of 4D where you can take a schedule, connect it in, and get the information grouped. And quite frankly, if the advanced work packaging model is adopted correctly, your CWPs would be in a schedule. Many projects, that's not the case. Most projects today, you get into it and the schedule is organized different than your CWPs per se. Then you get into the detailed bill of material data, and it's tough to sort out what goes into a schedule. And then you spend a lot of arm work trying to get those two lined up. And again, the tools to do that have gotten better over time. But being able to get not only the schedule and WBS definitions lined up with the CWPs and the deliverables, but also the cost coding information. There's significant efforts on that. But then again, as I mentioned, you get below the level 3 into the quantity tracking level, where you're in a level 4, level 5, level 6, depending upon your project, what level it is. But ultimately, you're down to an individual component that needs to be tracked. So we're going to take a diversion here to address some of the questions. So we've got one that's, how do you accept information in 1.0 could have a dramatic effect on your ability to monitor information required for 2.0? So that's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah.
Definitively. Yes.
I think it prioritizes, that you can't just run some things in parallel to some extent. You have to be respectful that the fact that there's the interdependencies.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point also to discuss, coming back to the point of this meeting and our team organizations. We're chunking the problem down. Let's not fall into silos that are then just focusing on a piece of it, making sure that the teams in our team overall is giving the picture of the forest and don't get stuck down at a tree level. Because that first pass of engineering to procurement, fabrication to scheduling, the fact is these are all interrelated. And again, there's going to be lines going between the two that I think that's what we're going to wean out, is where are the information dependencies across these. And so there's a high level of interdependency.
So just keep on.
Yeah, and so in terms of how do you plan for 2.0 while driving 1.0, they need to be done in parallel. And I think, again, on our team, one of the risks we would face would say, well, hey, let's just go in and focus on the engineering side of it. I'm suggesting we do a breadth then depth, meaning let's have coverage in all of those areas. And depending upon resources available and who jumps in on the team to actually commit, it's doubtful we're going to be able to cover them all. In fact, we're probably going to add items that we would ultimately want to get more detail in, but we should prioritize and have coverage across all of the areas in parallel as we develop the information. And the reality is that really needs done to some extent on the projects as well. And we'll get into the process for implementation later, where some of that hopefully becomes clearer through the development of our project.
Hey, Ted, one of the things I kind of went through is you were going through the 1.0 and the 2.0, just kind of defining whether it's a typical engineering activity or is it a construction activity, trying to, especially in the 2.0 where you get a pretty good mix where who typically takes responsibility of these particular activities, to kind of get a feel for where the work's being done.
Yes.
And then one, it was between engineering and fabrication, identifying. So I just kind of made my notes and marked them up to kind of see which house they belong to.
Well, that's right. And there's a slide we'll get to later in terms of what would define as the deliverables for each of our bite-sized chunks. And that's one of the key things that analysis needs to say, is who's the participants into this, who are the responsible parties. And that should be analyzed on a point-by-point, at a point-by-point level. And we'll get to a deliverable slide that really points that out in maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Getting beyond the CPM schedule and the cost alignment, really, my mind is saying there's in addition to the engineering areas, there's probably a 3.5, 3.6, and we're looking for input on what do we see initially missing relative to advanced work packaging. One word of caution is we're not trying to solve the integration problems for the entire project or entire life cycle. We want to keep this focused on the advanced work packaging model, so that we don't get too far outside the bounds. But I'll say that again, the advanced work packaging model took an approach of saying, here's the entire project delivery system. And they identified boxes that were traditional project activities. They identified and they classified boxes in this big detailed process model in 3 different categories: traditional project activities. On the other extreme, project activities that are completely new and part of the advanced work packaging model. Then an intermediate category that said project activities that are modified based upon, traditionally the projects have done this, but there needs to be some modifications to that activity based upon the advanced work packaging model. And I think we need to do some level of classification ourselves of, hey, typically the project's doing this already. It's something they've already done, versus is this something completely new, versus is this something that, well, it's a modification to how projects did it before. And there may be things that are suggested up as bullet points where we go, well, that's a traditional project delivery thing, but it's completely outside of advanced work packaging, right? Because that's what they also did in their diagram as well. Here's a box as a reference box, but it's just complementary to advanced work packaging, not really affected by it. So diving into a specific example would really help provide perhaps some clarification on how we're looking to break this down. So I'm going to go to one of my favorite ones, which comes back to the materials area again, which is really being able to understand that constraint between an installation work package and what materials are available on site, and do you have enough work in front of you based upon materials to be productive. And this gives just a visualization of the type of results that would come out of that analysis, where you'd be able to come into both a CWA, CWP level, and then ultimately zoom into a specific work package and know, do I have all the materials, do I have part of the materials, and do I have none of the materials? And so if you look at breaking that work process down, AIM 2.5 would be work packages drive the trial allocation process. It's not a one-way flow. One of the challenges with the materials are certain material types, like a valve, 8-inch block valve, you may have 150 of those on a project, and where you decide to use them should be based upon your priorities of what you want to build. And so most material management systems support I say site material management systems support the process of defining the work packages, getting them loaded into the material management system, then having the material management system allocate the materials based upon your priorities of what you want to build first, second, third. And then the material management system will give back a shortage report of what's not available for those set of packages. And being able to utilize that information in the planning process is represented in this simplified schematic block diagram. And then what we're going to hone in on as one of those blue bullets here is this site material management system operation, where one of the challenges that many material management managers on a project will have is they just lack the granular definition of the work packages, because in the system you may initially define CWP or schedule level areas, but again, that's a pretty broad macro level, and if that's all you're doing, great, you get a certain benefit, but there's significant benefit to then further refine the definition of those boundaries into the materials management system down to an installation work package level, so you actually have an answer of, well, I don't have partial for the whole thing, but I can come into this part and start doing the building process here. And you're going to have information going into the material management system of what is the work package scope and sequence, basically defining the priorities of what you want to build where, and then the results of what's coming out is going to be a material feasibility analysis coming out of that material management system that can be used to then support the type of visualizations we looked at in the previous slide. And I'm not going to go through the set of attributes, and this would be for the project to actually do. This is just one example that I threw up that we kind of got to maybe use as a starting point, but kind of call it a fresh day. And in fact, I mean, there's two things here saying that there's really a definition of what your work packages are, then there's another definition of the schedule. So what's here shown here in the data is more the schedule of the IWPs that are being done in a production planning system. You could try to do that in a CPM-based scheduling system on a large mega project. Not the best thing to do, because the reality is those definitions are changing at a fairly frequent rate based upon your constraints. And if you try to manage all of that in a CPM scheduling system, it can become logistically a nightmare for the project. So you're better off doing a production planning approach. But regardless of where the data is, again, you need to drive the definition of the scope of the package and the sequencing of the package. And then the result would come out saying, well, what's available? What materials do you have? What's been issued, what's been reserved, what's been forecasted. This is the type of information that you can get out. This is, again, one example. It's actually often better if you get it down to where the material management system passes you back. Also, you may have a double here of I mentioned before, a shortage report. Something would say, for this package, here's explicitly the materials that are missing, can be another data set. But we want to get down to that level of the specific information examples. And I want to emphasize something else. This is a particularly problematic one, because many times these data flows need to go across enterprise boundaries. It's very often the case that at the IWP level, you have a constructor that is potentially a separate company than the EPC prime contractor on a project that may have the materials management system. And so where you get a materials management system and then another team building packages, but all they have access to is a Citrix screen of the materials, they have no way to automate the loading of packages into it, no way to receive automated dumps out of it, you'll see the advanced work packaging in the field slowly lose a major aspect of its benefit because the information exchange had to flow across enterprise boundaries. So as we identify these, that's one of the things we also want to emphasize is particularly where, and it's going to be a project-specific implementation part, but at least we can give a generalized analysis to say, where does information need to flow from one company to another? Meaning, coming back to the previous view, the team actually building the IWPs may be different than the team that has their hands on the administrative and pushing the buttons and doing the actual management of the site materials. Maybe it is the same contractor. It again depends upon the specific project.
Hey Ted, we got a question about change management. Is where would it fall in on the current slide that you see? You currently have where do you see change management falling in?
I think that's it's fundamentally pervades across all of them. And we actually have identified a major area which not only deals with change management, but also with the alignment of the component level bill of materials across these systems, which suddenly comes across. Now, obviously, a big part of the change management is being driven from the engineering information coming in, but as a work process, it's one that we need to categorize and look at from a project. So I think it's a highly valid question, and perhaps one of our biggest challenges to say, well, how are we going to address that? Because again, it pervades. It's as opposed to the other 1.1, 1.2s, it kind of becomes one that suddenly is pervading across them.
Yeah, because it can make you go back and undo stuff that you've already done.
Yeah.
So now your packages that were complete are now incomplete.
Yeah.
And you got to go back.
Well, I would state this as well. I mean, one of the things that came out of the COA CII model, and this, I'm speaking from major practical experience on this, you need to keep your packages virtual all the way to the end. And that's one of the things that the CII models really pointed out is that if you go in and get whatever tool you want to use and then start building packages and chunking them on the shelves and say, hey, great, I'm doing work-based planning, here's all my packages. Oh, danger. It's the Will Rogers danger. Forget the old TV show there, reference to the joke. But you need, because again, the fluidity at the IWP doesn't mean at the CWP level. At the CWP level, you should be defining relatively fixed. You still have these change management issue, but you're dealing with a level where even though the scope within them, at the IWP level, you may be throwing IWPs out and defining entire new IWPs. You may just be changing IWP boundaries. So if your project's going into a mode of building installation work packages, printing them out, putting them on the shelf, as you said, saying they're complete in the planning phase, it tends to make that change management problem unmanageable. Meaning suddenly the changes are going to happen, not just because of engineering revisions, but because of constraints. You start having deals with the packages. You need to keep those IWPs virtual until you can do them. The field's committed to do them. So taking them through the last planner concepts of, one is you're not just doing work because, hey, that's something I want to do. It should be following your overall sequence and schedule. So is it a should? Is it a can, meaning can I actually do this work, which is the constraint question, and then am I committed to doing it? Do you have the crews saying, yes, I'm going to do it? Because the other major thing that also COA CII point out is if you end up having packaging that doesn't directly reflect what's being done in the field, again, you kind of lose it. Even if they're constraint free, your field may be off doing something else. You need to have a commitment with the crews and have the crews involved in that planning. But coming back to the change management, we need to drive the system and the vendors to further be able to propagate new information into the package and then have a last chance editing of the package before you say this one is executable. Now let me commit it to being an officially released work package. So your revving of the packages, you should be keeping them in a virtual state until you know that you can do them. So you're trying to minimize building a package, putting all the documentation into it to find out that, well, I didn't have materials or I didn't have a drawing. Now I can only do a piece of a package. So coming back to this list, I just want to, I don't want to overly rush, and I do want to leave it up for a minute. I kind of hit the CPM schedule and cost alignment, and we've got a good question again we want to come back to. I'm just going to, flip and then come back if you don't mind. A major effort for us, and I mentioned this before, is for us to review, add, and prioritize. So we've divided this meeting up into two major sessions. One, which is let's present the information. Then another one is let's switch to the telephone part of the meeting and jump in and really get the input, where we're hoping a large portion of our audience there can stay on and add, not just through you have to type in a question, but on the phone add in, hey, have you thought about this and have you thought about that? So we're gonna come back to this as a major focal point of our interactive discussions. Okay, so let's go over to the question. Reg, do you want to read the question?
Yeah, there's a question that asked if you should include where does cost reporting break down? Is it part of the WBS construction work packaging, or how does that fit in?
In our definition over here, I've got it as a 3.2. It's definitively an item that should also be similar to a WBS. We should have the work packages, and in a sense, in my mind, the cost coding is a parallel organization to the IWP. Now, this is going to become, I think, as the industry matures, an issue of high degree of debate and hopefully further productivity improvement. What I mean by that is some of the companies that have been adopting work-based planning down at an IWP level are starting to realize, hey, why don't we make an IWP an actual cost code and then measure and track productivity by that IWP? Right now, that's generally not done in the industry. Generally, cost codes are independently maintained, but independent of whether they line up with the CWP. Let's assume when most projects are not going to line up with the CWP, not line up with the IWP boundary, it comes back to that point I made earlier of component level alignment, meaning we should be able to tack every component onto a cost code or more than one cost code, right? Because a component's going to go through multiple activities. So a component, you take a pipe spool or a valve or a steel beam or a cable that needs to be pulled. There's going to be a set of cost codes that are going to be attached and associated with those components. And that, how you get that done is the intent of 3.2, meaning it's not just saying get the cost code definition. The 5D aspect says we should be able to align each of these components at our BIM level down to a set of cost codes that need to be tracked. Now, at that's where then that component at a cost code level relates to some work package. And it may not even be an installation work package, right? Because then it suddenly matrices into, it may be part of a test package, may be part of an installation work package, may be part of a module work package, which is a subset within a module. I mean, and the whole module area is another one that still has some lack of definition. For many of the modules I'm seeing built, to say one whole module is a work package is a bit of a joke. Some of the ones I've seen done up in Canada, yeah, you could say this little pipe rack, maybe you call that a work package. But in all honesty, if you're following the COA model, you should be breaking that at that IWP level, which may go into even a module shop, should be broken down into what equates to a shift or a set of work that's being done through maybe a 10-day shift or a 1 week period approximately. One of the principles, by the way, if you're not onto it, is you shouldn't be breaking the work packages down by hours. There's a recommended guideline that says, well, hey, make it something that's doable, but they should have good start-stop finishes. But it shouldn't be a start-stop finish that suddenly pervades 2 to 3 months of the project or a month of the project. It should be a bite-sized chunk, but use common sense and constructability to get the scope of the package to be something that it makes sense to do all of that as one chunk of work. Maybe it takes a week and a half, maybe it takes 2. But coming down back to the question is, if you think about it at a data level, information level, the cost codes are defined somewhere. Where to pull that from is again something that 3.2 should define. But then 3.2 may end up becoming a 3.2, 3, 4. That's where we may see a couple of them in there. I know that for both the 4D and the 5D, those are pretty significant categories compared to some of the others. But at least on the first pass of putting it up there, coming down to the data level again, as you get, there's a matching process to say, take the components that are being driven out of engineering, whether they're in a 3D model or coming from the fabricator data, et cetera, and get cost codes assigned onto them, not just one, but cost codes based upon the specific activities. Whenever you're building those IWPs, you're essentially picking some material, and you're not putting the material in the package per se. You're really putting the task level 5 or level 6 task associated with that material, that component, into the package, which should be associated with some cost code. And so, if you look at an IWP, you got a set of cost codes that as you progress that work, it should be coming back and then, going directly into updating what work's being done in a cost code area. So a bit of a long answer, but I didn't want to trivialize the question either. I think it's a really key one. And I think that schedule and cost alignment areas, if you went to again, our priorities of breadth and depth, those are kind of the two of the big ones to say, well, if you don't get those type of alignments, you're not getting the benefit on the productivity analysis that could come out of the work packaging. Doesn't mean advanced work packaging you're not going to get any benefits of, but I've seen that many times. You'll see, well, the packages are going there, but you're having a hard time monitoring package progress back to updating of cost codes. And quite frankly, coming back to my point on measuring productivity on a package level, our industry suffers from true productivity analysis, which is why getting quantitative measurables on the benefits of something, our productivity analysis tend to be macro level, and it's tough to get down to true productivity. At a recent COA Best Practices Conference, we saw a presentation from a team from Shell where they had the productivity analysis down to, in fact, they defined what do they call it? A CBS, a cost breakdown structure, where they had, now these were for highly repeatable work as part of the Albion Sands tailings part of the project, not the whole Albion Sands, but the tailings where it's kind of the pipeline. They ended up getting work packages at a level 6 put into a Primavera schedule where they were highly repeatable and executable, so that they weren't so much shuffling of them, meaning the work isn't so constrained as maybe a major ISBL area where things are changing so much. So in that case, they did use Primavera to manage all their packages, and they were measuring productivity down at the level of individual welds. Fantastic. I mean, that's where we want to see, I think, this ultimately come. And perhaps we build upon some of that practical experience of what the guys did up there on that project, the team did on that project, and introduce the CBS. But certainly people are going to have their inputs, and that's where we look for some of the stakeholders who have expertise in the cost breakdown structure area to get involved.
I think, Ted, you're right that with cost, there just isn't a correlation between the current cost models and work-based planning or IWPs. And the trouble is, so when you try and benchmark one, it doesn't correlate to the other one, so you can't actually show the cost benefit. It gets lost because no one can actually, it's apples and oranges, not apples and apples. And
precisely.
Just becomes
then you get into, well, what really maybe helped the productivity? It's blurred across many different things. And to be able to get into then understanding even what areas of your project are having trouble. I think that's where if we had a better blending and alignment between the work packaging and the cost coding structures, it would provide more immediate feedback on where the work packaging is working well, where it's not. So it's not just did it overall help the project, but where can the project provide more attention? And that was part of what Shell actually presented. They won an industry award for their effort on that project. Yeah, so I was really excited about it. And that's one of the major points that they said was it suddenly turned the light on, right? It was like, it's a little tough to do because sometimes that whole contractual relationship between the owner and the contractors to get all the visibility of what's being done on the table, but it ultimately benefits everybody. And, once the light was on in terms of where the trouble areas are, it's easier to go in and focus in on that work. Reg, do we have another question we want to discuss?
Yeah, one individual that's on the webinar pointed out that they see a call out for scaffolding, but not for construction equipment.
Fantastic feedback. Let's add it in. That's exactly what we wanted to get. So now we've got a 4.9, equipment, management, and I think that's key.
Okay, and then there was another question here the question is that I see in BSA is involved. Are you using building information modeling in this AIM effort, and are you talking with Deke Smith about BSA?
No, that the intent would be to do that, absolutely. To say that no, the direct question, we haven't yet engaged in a heavy level discussion with Deke Smith, and for those that are joining the project and have the institutional commercial side of industry domain expertise, we're hoping we can get you involved and engage those discussions. They've developed a fairly detailed specification, and in fact, one of the things I'd say hopefully we can do, not necessarily phase 1, but is certainly a phase 2 aspect of our project, is they've got some data sets available on that side of the camp. Meaning, if I'm understanding a BSA, and please add in there, is is what I heard. One of the things I learned at the most recent FIA Tech Showcase was there's now a published data model. Todd,
Yeah,
maybe
I
you want to
have
comment
all-
on that.
Yeah, I have them all on my computer right now, so I have them on external hard drive, so I can.
So
share with you.
certainly from the engineering
So,
side, we
yeah.
have a data set to start with in terms of something that could be used to demonstrate, data integration and how to do the packaging.
Yeah, the IFC models and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there was a follow-up comment that was made with respect to effort that's going on that could be associated with 3.0. There's activity that's life cycle phases and subphases, and it seems to be an opportunity for us to coordinate with AIM, and this is BSA standards 3.0.
Yeah.
So we obviously have to link into that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the key areas that I've also tucked in, and it was a bit of a debate in my mind, under 4.0, there's a whole area of how do these packages integrate with document management. And I think it's an open issue that's not that hard for us to solve, but let's try to nail it down. And part of the, personally, I think, part of the challenge we face there is proprietary aspects of systems, meaning does it end up becoming that each vendor supports their own package management system, but meanwhile you see that many contractors and owners have a system like a Documentum or something that ultimately those packages should be going into. And so there's kind of a work in process management of the package while you're still under that high rev, hey, things are changing, engineering's changing, the nature, the boundaries of the packages are changing. But once you say, hey, this is the package, I want to do it, which is why I put it under the 4.0. Meaning once that package is saying, hey, this is a package, I'm committing to it, we should be defining an interface that says, how does that package now become an official Rev 1 of a version that goes under document control? And that is an area where from not a technical aspect, but a work process model, COA and CII have nailed it. There is really good definition that the COA CII model has one level that is detailed work process diagrams according to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, that looks at advanced work packaging in the framework of the entire project. And again, it gets down to very detailed work process blocks. They've got another complementary set of diagrams that is focused on the life cycle of a work package. Now, I'm not sure, it'd be coming back to the question, the life cycle model being developed by BSA may not align up. We're doing that analysis of where does that fall into and relative to the COA documentation. And then again, given that our focus is on advanced work packaging, us not trying to solve the whole industry's data integration problems, I think we would be very much in our interest to take that life cycle of a work package and see how that applies to that BSA model. And even though, in some sense, 10 years ago, whenever, it was like exploring was work packaging, it's very much a kind of a practice that was being adopted in industrial plant. Went over to some building contractors, they're like, we don't do that. Well, what's interesting is, some of the recent events I've attended, you've got companies that in fact are doing it. They're just not calling it work packaging. And so, we've got to be sensitive to the terminology, et cetera. But having an effort to say, take what's already been done, because there's been some significant advancements relative to BSA, and seeing how that lines up with the definition of packages. And is it just a terminology, and then taking the life cycle of a package and applying that life cycle of a package management into here? Then coming back to my point, the life cycle of package really gets into that constraint analysis, keeping the package virtual, defining it early, constraining it, then once it's ready for field execution, now making it an official document that gets delivered into the project. It's a control document that should be managed and interfaced into document control. Additionally to that, it's kind of similar to the point of, well, hey, what about equipment? You'll suddenly see that, for the different work package types, there's different types of documents that need to go in there. And many times that's just a template document that somebody's filling out information from. It may not be fed by data from some other automated system. And so for us to be able to do that analysis and say, hey, this is the type of document that once you make a package, there becomes a form that somebody's filling in, and identifying that as part of what we're into. And then we don't want to discount the testing, turnover, and completion side of it as well. So I'm going to go on, Reg.
Yeah, so the takeaway on this is that I just got some emails from the Building Smart Alliance folks, and we need to hold hands with them very quickly.
Fantastic.
And so, and then obviously there's synergies there too. So we're very opportunistic in the sense as long as we're advancing the industry as a whole, everything's good.
Good. Okay, so we're going to come back to this again later in our discussion, so let's keep on going so we can do it. But this is where, and this is where I should have had the change management on there. So somebody's called me out, I should have been here. But I think that there's core information mapping requirements that span across them. And the one I highlighted here, which is definitively related to the change management, and trust me, I've had more detailed slides I could have put in here, is consistency and global alignment and naming conventions. And I want to make a little point on my own, and we'll see where it ends up at the end of this, not just the team meeting, but this overall project. Many times I go into sessions and there's this idea, well, we just need a master registry of all the components somewhere. I actually think that's a farce. I think that's something that then, if you get down to it, you can have multiple parallel definitions of components and it physically reality makes sense. Engineering may make something and they designed a beam or let's say a wall panel, something, and it was designed as red. Somehow it ended up being fabricated and it became blue. But the field decided it was going to become purple. Now, do you end up just saying, well, it's got a red, blue, and purple attribute and multiplex it? The reality is each of those groups may have had parallel activities going on where in their perspective, there was some reason why they did that. And point being, to think that we're going to solve this by having one master database where all the components live and all the systems just work off of that is not only from an information technology perspective unmanageable, it is also doesn't go to the needs of the physical reality of projects where you've got situations where you need to have parallel representations of that information. Okay, so I don't think we solve this by just saying, hey, there's some single database where all the components are. On a more practical level, I think we can solve it by coming up with a work process that institutes consistency in what you call components across the different applications being used on a project, as well as not just the lowest level BOM, but also the aggregation of definitions of turnovers and areas and CWPs and EWPs to make sure that the various applications that are being used are using a consistent terminology, which then, if change occurs at one point and was introduced through engineering, or change was introduced through fabrication, or change was introduced through the field, that change can be easily propagated into the other systems. That's one of the things we definitively struggle with is that there's not an upfront effort to get consistency in alignment of the conventions, where slight misnaming conventions can suddenly make it difficult to get alignment between these systems. And then again, to another further practical aspect is you may have detailing going on where, again, coming down to the granularity, there's an initial definition of something in an engineering phase. It gets further broken down in the fabrication phase. So there's a hierarchy of the naming conventions that are very much at play and significantly correlate and relate to the change management.
Yeah, like a Project Skid is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Skid's got a name, and then there's all the components that make up the skid, and they just keep getting down.
Yeah. Whereas the skid in a engineered EPC model may just have a skid representation and not representing all of the lower level components. In fact, some of that lower level, what's on the skid may not be delivered until the turnover phase. And many times there's practical reasons why an equipment manufacturer doesn't, and they shouldn't be required to divulge all their information in terms of that level of detail to every participant on the project, because that's a proprietary piece of equipment that you don't want to have. So here it is, everybody's got access to all that model information. I mean, there's real significant, again, physical and practical contractual limitations to how the information is shared and why it's not going to all be in one big master database. Okay. So, we're going to get into now saying that's how we want to approach the problem. Is chunking it down into these subsections. And what would we see as our set of deliverables? So going from the top, what we've talked about at a detailed example level so far really applies to what we're calling, and apologize if the term's a little confusing. We struggled as we put the slides together for what do we call it, but we're calling it a library of information mapping requirements and sources. Meaning we chunked the problem down into larger sections and then into smaller sections where the library is made up of those sections. And in fact, I think that evolves over the course of time. right? Our aim phase 1 and phase 2 may not hit them all. And in fact, as we get into it, but it should be something that would allow additional content to be added to it in the future. But, we want to come out with the descriptions of those individual target mappings, those little blue balls, and have those documents be delivered as part of our AIM deliverables. But it's only an example and a reference model. And so equally important as a deliverable on our project is how would you use it? And how would you then go from, I've got a project, I need to make use of this stuff. So we actually develop in parallel with that library, we develop a specific project implementation guide that goes from the reference model into specifically how would you implement this on a project. And that would be represented by this. And we're going to detail each one of these out a little more in the following slides. In addition to that, we want to really use it, right? So we don't want to just be left with we're producing something and it's not being effectively utilized. So we've made it part of our project deliverable to get involved in the evaluation. That's the proof of concept. Number 3 goes to, there's already efforts out there, BSA being a good one, the ISO 15926 being another one. We want to make our project not something running independent of those. We're not intent to replace those activities. We're going to reference them. Hopefully, in a lot of our cases that we go through and we say, here's a blue ball, here's the function and purpose of this activity, here's the information in, here's the information out. Oh, great, there's 3 standards based upon what sector of the industry you're in that are related to that. Maybe there's one standard that suffices across all sectors of the industry. Let's reference it, give it a thumbs up. Great. There may be areas where we go, hey, there's really nothing that's touched this yet. And again, it's not going to stop us from defining it. Maybe it means that a standard ultimately gets put in place. It may be something that, well, hey, we've done enough of a job where we've come up with a reference model that at least for a project, we don't want lack of a standard to stop us from defining it so it could be used on a project, and I don't think it has to. And we're not wanting to become a standards effort, but I believe our analysis will hopefully drive more information into the standards efforts so that, we could give them feedback. And that's part of that deliverable, is not just to say, well, hey, where do the standards relate to this advanced work packaging model, but even more so begin to develop where they don't cover and provide that as we've identified information requirements where maybe they could cover them in the future. And then the 4th one goes to, let's get engaged with some member companies and actually putting this to use, providing feedback on it, and then having it become a continuous improvement process. And then finally, a report that would go with that. So this is another one that we need to beat up, although I believe to some extent it's going to be done in the team breakouts beyond this meeting. Although if people have comments, I think we should reserve a little bit of time to get some comments on this as well. Particularly, again, one of the slides we bring back up during the interactive discussion mode. This was our effort to say, okay, as we chunk the problem down, the equivalent of an installation work package, what's our outline for each one of the functional scope areas that we want to identify? We come in and we do a little workflow diagram like the example I showed, where it shouldn't be overly complicated. If it's got tons of activities, that's where it would really say, hey, break this down further. If it's something that has 1 or 2 activities that we can focus on, inputs and outputs on, great. And we should have a written description so that it's not just somebody at a slide like we did today kind of verbalizing it. It's something that would capture that description of it so it's officially documented and described with some supporting figures and tables. And I think this is also where, in parallel with our work breakdown structure of deliverable 3 standards activities, we may be able to go out and pull information from other specific efforts. Like that, the one I pulled out was an early version of something COA and CII was working on. So it wasn't even, that was the life cycle of the work package document where I said, well, hey, here's a great example where some applications that need to support this, right? They're talking about it in terms of functional use, independent of applications. We suddenly say, well, hold on, there's material management application, et cetera. And so I think as we look into the BSA documentation, look into the industry documents and standards efforts, we may be able to pull from material there already where they've already solved some of that, which is great, which may accelerate down the rest of the list. But may not be, it shouldn't stop us from at least pulling it down and doing the due diligence to go through and produce these subset deliverables under, this is a per mapping, if that makes sense. I want to make sure that's clear. So we're not doing this for the whole project. We're taking each one of those individual functional use cases and then breaking them down into this is the information we produce for one of them. The required functionality in representative applications in what we're calling resources, where in our sense, resources is either a source of information or something that needs to receive information, would also be part of the analysis we do there. What are the applications that are involved? Who are the people that are actually using those applications? All right, so that's where we want to identify what the roles are and say, well, who's actually doing it. And I put there as a fourth bullet, us emphasizing, hey, this is often, it may not be 100% the case, but this is an often cross-enterprise information exchange. Let's highlight those, because I think to some extent that helps drive some of our prioritization, because experience in the past has been when the workflows are more self-contained within a single contractor on the project, they often succeed much better. But when they suddenly involve information being exchanged across them, also interdivisional. So it may not just be enterprise, but it's also good to point out that it may be a divisional boundary that needs crossed within a company. So we can do an analysis to say, hey, this information needs to come from a different division within the same company or even across companies. The list of inputs, outputs. So this is the information in, this is the information coming out. The next two, in a sense, correlate to this information outputs. It's more of a categorization where we say some of that information may be directly going into the package itself, right? And as we were in the FIA Tech Showcase, that was something we kept, was kind of going down. I was making the point that a lot of these information exchanges don't necessarily go into the package. They support the planning and execution of the packages themselves. And so let's classify them as, hey, is this an information flow where that is something that goes into the package, where the package is a document set that's going to be published and put into document control? Or is this a supporting information exchange that's being used to do a constraint analysis on a package, but isn't necessarily something that goes into the package itself?
Like a piece of equipment that's required.
Talk real loud.
Yeah.
There was a question, a comment that when we have a conversation in here that you need to restate the question, or else whoever it is speak really, really loud.
Finish it, do the conversation with everybody.
Yeah, on the phone.
Yeah, and again, we can discuss this at the end when we have the open forum and we turn the phone on as well.
And I mentioned before, so as we develop the workflow diagram that references to applicable industry data standards, that's really should be done at the same time. So this isn't a sequential set of activities per se, but it's relative to that. I mean, again, if we can borrow workflow diagrams and we don't have to repeat them, that's actually the preference. Right? If we can go, hey, here's a functional case and there's something that's already covering this, fantastic. In addition to the information that's required, another key piece of practicality that needs done on a project is, well, how often does that information need to be supplied? Is this something where the applications need to talk live? Most situations, it's not. Most of the examples we're going to go through, it's really working off of some published information, right? Because somebody's using an application, they're producing something. And so, but what's the frequency and timing of that? How often would be our recommended delivery of that? And are there specific things relative to accuracy in addition to timing that should be noted? If we get to the last three, or at least that third to last one, I think we're cooking with grease for sure. I mean, can we get to the point where we actually have representative sample data sets? That's often the challenge is, it's proprietary, and furthermore, I put the word dynamic there. To think of it as a static data set takes a very BIM engineering centric aspect of it. The problem on construction is stuff is moving. And unless you've got data, and it hits the whole change management area, unless you've got data that actually shows the change at a certain state in the project, it's not like construction works off of 100% engineering, and engineering never changes, and then the plans never change, et cetera. These are dynamic moving data sets. And so one of the challenges of doing this in a simulation is it would cost a lot of money and time to try to simulate a real project. So I think the reality is that, until you latch onto a project where all that data is really moving, you can't really demonstrate that, you've got this right. And that's certainly, I think, one of the conundrums we face in advanced work packaging overall. Now maybe as we simplify it down and we determine, well, hey, if we break this use case down, it gets us into, a simple example. But, going through that one that I showed, just the materials management one, it took a large effort to try to simulate that independent of a project. I've been through it. So just for that one to say, hey, we're going to come in and show multiple materials movement and receiving, and then suddenly you latch onto a project and there's all the data. If you follow me, meaning now the challenge, it's like the chicken before the egg kind of thing, right? Because until you have the definition, then get the information in the format you want and the consistency you want. So that should not stop us from doing the definitions, but how far we get along the representative sample data sets, I think we're going to not only be bounded by member participation, but we're going to be bounded by the fact that it's not easy to fake a lot of the construction side of the data. It's not, I'm not going to say that it's trivial or easier. I'm just saying that having the experience of it, it is more simpler to come up with a representative BIM or an engineering model that's, has the components, because you're publishing something as opposed to being published consuming in such a high dynamic environment. So some of the functional cases, it may not be trivial to get to that deliverable. And so some of this is significantly going to feed into the other deliverables, like the analysis of what standards are there, the recommendation for what additional things need to be done. So this first major deliverable area, the mappings, really becomes our point of our information production that's going to feed into the final report, feed into our write-up of what standards exist or not, help drive what can be done in a demonstration, because it's going to be defined by how much we produce here. So again, I don't suggest that this outline's 100% perfect, but Bill O'Brien had suggested, as one of the first activities, we go through one, produce it, make it a template, get an idea for how much effort it takes to produce this, and then we'll have a better sense for how much of a problem are we tackling off, as well as do we have the outline and the content correct. So I think that's a really good approach. Okay, so in terms of the project implementation guide, I initially defined it as 4 major steps that on a project, given that would have a library of information mapping, documentation requirements put together, the first step would be saying, the project does a needs assessment based upon this particular project. Where does information need to go? You could reference the library and really decide there may be things in the library that's completely missing and doesn't cover it for advanced work packaging, in which case, great. There may be, okay, great, pull this one out. So it's basically the process of identifying the specific project needs, what can be used and where things exist. And then the next step, the mapping, would be, well, now you actually take that as a reference mapping and realize it into the requirements for that project. Right, because it's going to also depend upon the exact nature of the systems and the contractual relationships. So our library is not something that it's a reference example to be implemented on a project. It's not intended to work as the exact dogmatic approach on each project. Having an ability to have our material be utilized on a project without dictating this is exactly how you have to do it, we think is a key aspect of this. But we should have a process on a project by which that analysis is done, and the mappings are actually then crystallized to the 4th point, which is it could be put into deliverables on the project. So a major theme of our overall AIM project approach is the contracting world works off of deliverables. Too often, data is not described as a deliverable. We're hoping to change that. And it's not just data that has to be handed over at the end of the project. In fact, there's other FIA Tech projects that are focusing more on that part. Our part is more information exchanges that need to occur in the project to support the advanced work packaging approach. And can we get those into where our library allows rapid pulling out of sections saying, well, hey, this contractor or this participant should be producing here. Here's the timing and frequency. And it's something to make the project really streamlined across project participants. Those can be included as data deliverables as part of a project. How far that uplift occurs, it's going to be interesting to see. But we're certainly going to define them with the intent that they could be used. And we want to define a process by which they could be put into contractual aspects of a contract. I wouldn't state that if it's not in a contractual aspect, it's not relevant or not beneficial. I think this information producing the requirements is still beneficial. Dan, I don't know if you'd have a strong opinion on that or not.
No, I say you're right on. Up in the top where you say guidelines, that's key.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's dictating a project, you must do this particular way.
Yeah.
It's a guideline saying, look at your job conditions and then apply these where they meet the conditions of the project.
Exactly. And then finally, to think that the process is just going to define it up front and then data starts flowing, we need to put a process in place and describe the process in which there's monitoring and oversight of it.
Auditing.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not a follow-up to see that is the information being produced, is it being consumed? Because it may be going into the ether and nothing's being done with it, right? So I mean, we're not doing this because we just like data. We're doing it because we want to make construction more productive and predictable. So is it effectively at the information level occurring? Now, emphasize a point. COA, CII, and potentially even what we find from the BSA information, there is a larger auditing of is advanced work packaging. And that's one of the major COA CII deliverables that I'd say everybody dive into and get a sense of is they've put together an auditing checklist on are you following the advanced work packaging process. So we shouldn't be repeating that again. We should be referring to it, but they don't get down into the information flows. So we should be doing that auditing it and describe it again as a process. Once you've identified the information flows, once you've mapped them specifically for your project, then you put them into specific deliverable requests where some company or division within a company has responsibility to deliver it. Let's put in place a system that can check for it. Now, hopefully that ultimately comes part of the great software vendors' functionality themselves, that ultimately, it's checking for that. Or, quite frankly, from what I understand around iRing and ISO 15926, iRing is independent of ISO 15926. And it could be used as a data validation and quality checking tool from what I understand. Now, it may be an area that we get a little bit more educated on. We may find a great synergy in the FIATech consortium here that's saying, well, hey, if we've got a reference model that can then be quickly tweaked on a project, can you have somewhere that just checks that information is meeting the content in delivery format specifications where iRing, which is one of the joint efforts with FIATech, is not specific to ISO 15926, but could be applied into it. And again, given that we're going to have many of our formats of information, we're going to say, well, this isn't exactly ISO 15926, but I bet you iRing would be, a potential great tool ultimately to use. I'm not suggesting our project will figure out the iRing part. So defining that process is, probably the chunk of the work there, along with the roles and responsibilities, the checklists, KPIs, and then gating requirements. So, I think those bullet 2 through 5 are, in a sense, sub-bullets of that overall process. Probably should have had them, sub-bulleted. And then rolling that up into an actual project implementation guide is one of the major deliverables. So in my mind, I'm right now seeing, this project's producing 2 major products, the library along with this implementation guide. Our other deliverables, the final report, et cetera, are all valuable as well, but I believe that those at least would define, and we're looking to get some good feedback on that work breakdown structure. Talked a lot around this, so I don't think I need to cover it much. It just further breaks down this whole idea of roll-up of pulling what the information's been produced out of the individual mappings and aggregating it, correlating it across the different lower level functional mappings into a consolidated document, and then communicating and engaging with BSA and the ISO 15926 and other industry standard working groups, what we do. The proof of concept validation, which we really broke down into 2 major sections, one being validating the library itself. Meaning as we go from, hey, this is what we think the information needs to be mapped, that needs to be realized is, do those mappings make sense? Of course, we're saying those mappings aren't dogmatic, they're reference examples, but if our reference examples are way off base, then we should find out by actually trying to put them to use and validating the process, the project implementation guide itself. So we see a verification and validation around both aspects of that on a project. We should also develop a plan on how we're going to engage with the member projects themselves, get them educated, provide support and engagement with the projects on use of the tools, and then get the feedback. Right, so that as we coordinate with the member deployments, have them help drive our effort in terms of what's working, what's not, and what we can do better in follow-on efforts. I'm not going to walk through every section of this report. I'm going to get into some of the interactive conversations from a timing perspective.
So do we want to wake up the phone now?
I think so. Let me just give me one more minute, because this is an important part. This is just a visual representation of what we had on the board, or what we went through in terms of the deliverables. So it's just a nice visual representation. And this is what we're proposing as phase 1. So for phase 1, it may be biting off a lot, but the point I want to make is that we're going to cover some set of those functional requirements. So the expectation is we're not going to hit 100% of them, but we're going to prioritize which ones we have and focus on the project implementation guide. So kind of push forward in those two areas. And as we're going through those, we're obviously identifying the standard efforts and pushing them out, but we're not yet going into writing a report. We're not yet going into trying it out on a project. Initially, I said we're not yet writing the final report, but as Reg and I went back through it, sections 2 through 7 don't really depend upon, it's section 7 and beyond that really depend upon what we do. Sections 2 through 7 are more background. We already have a lot of background information, so viably, if we can get a resource onto that, Reg, we could start cranking out the report.
Well, and also the final report's going to encapsulate the project plan, which will be derived from this presentation today. So it is more or less a living document that'll be aggregating information as it emerges.
Okay. Then we've proposed a set of team meetings, and what we're really looking for is in our discussion, not just to get feedback, to actually get people to commit. Because at the end of the day, this is the challenge we all face is that this is a volunteer organization, and but this benefits our individual organizations. But if we don't get people, we've already got Martin, Terry, Jarrett, myself, Reg, and Dr. O'Brien. And at the member meeting that we had, there was a lot of people that said, yeah, we wanted to do. We didn't have a good plan. We feel we now have a good basis of a plan. We want to break it down into these areas. Maybe there's a column missing. We can discuss that. But instead of making it one big project team, let's divide it into at our quote unquote CWP level, deliverable level, and make smaller teams where we can have people get more engaged. So if you're an expert in engineering and data deliverables coming from engineers or fabricators, jump in on that side. Let's get down to saying what attributes need to be in the models and how is information passed off. If you're more on the materials management, that's great for you to participate, et cetera. If you're into the 4D, 5D area of how we correlate costs and schedule with the models, jump in. If you're heavy into getting the packages constrained, analyzed, and officially documented into document control, as well as have areas of equipment management or scaffolding that are particular interest for you. You don't have to sign up for just one. You could be interested in a few of them. I don't think that's a problem. As a management team, we need to bring them together and make sure that there's consistency across them and make sure that the groups are participating and they don't become silos in of themselves. If you just want to be a reviewer, meaning you don't really feel that you can contribute too much, but as we generate information, you're somebody who you'd like to receive it and then provide. But if you're going to sign up as a reviewer, we're hoping you really provide critical comments and give constructive input to what's being produced. And if you're not sure yet, let us know as well. So, Reg, we want to break into the conversation?
Yes. Todd, can you bring the slide up with the phone number on it again? Sure. It's like the second one. So we've Shell's been kind enough to set up a call-in phone number for you to use, and we'll turn that on. Let me give it to you again. In the meeting here at the Shell facility, we have Shell here, we have Ted, we have a representative from Zachary as well as Jacobs, and so and Aviva, yeah, and so we're able to essentially obviously talk quietly amongst ourselves. But if you see right below the header on this slide, you'll see a phone number. If you call in on that phone number and enter the conference ID, you'll be able to talk with us in this forum now. So please make a note of that because we're going to back down to the slides again. So it's.
Do you want to leave that for 5 minutes and give folks a bio break, coffee break?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Good.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Please get call in on this number, enter your ID, and we'll pick up from there. Okay? Thank you.
Good idea.
Yes.
So next week. So
You get a coffee.
Hello? Anybody out there?
Yeah, I think they went for break for 5 minutes.
Justin, how are you? How are you?
Yeah. I knew that.
Me too.
Yeah, and knowledgeable, and he certainly knows what he's talking about. You know, I can't count the number of times he said the same thing again and again and again and again.
I guess it's hard too because you don't know on the other hand who what people's level of knowledge is.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's, you know, we'll see what the level of interest is by the number of people that drop the webinar and don't pick up.
Yeah, I wanted to see how many were on
There were 30, 36, 37.
See, that's what I thought. I thought maybe I just was reading it wrong and it was 80, but it was really only 30.
There's probably that many now, but
31 now. We had 80 something registers.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, but I can't believe we got so few on the actual call.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he sent out the invite.
Well, I'm sweet, but just like that.
And I'm one of the ones on the call. So
Okay.
I've got the webinar up here.
But yeah, when I registered, I'm not. So I guess there's maybe a couple of those.
Let's see. Hi folks, this is Mark Shiverly from Shell. Can you guys hear me on the call?
Yes.
Excellent. We'll leave the mic open now. We just had it on mute. The folks are walking back into the room.
Those people joining again.
We have 5 folks on the call, and there's still a number of them on the webinar.
I'm going to. Oh, it is, but it's still, I need to get some contracts in first.
Need a little revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Don't wanna ramp up too much on the cost side of things. Hedging the bets. It's like a construction project. Gotta get the award. All right.
Yeah, your mic's hot.
So I think we're getting reassembled back in the room for those that are back online. Can somebody chime in to see if we've got audio connection?
Yep, we've got 5 folks dialed in on audio. We still have a number of them out on the webinar, so I'm not sure.
That's great. We've got 31 out there. We didn't scare off everyone.
No.
I was expecting at this phase to drop down to 5 or 6. So we just go right to that, sign up your name. I'd love to see if we can drive some participation. If we want to spend more time on feedback, that's good as well. And at the end of the day, if we get some people, if you're not going to ready to commit or don't want to state your opinion in this session, and Reg, we are running a little short on time. We were scheduled for 10, 10:15.
No, it was
10:30, 10:45 at least.
Fantastic. Okay, so we do have some room for discussion, because my point was, kind of blending it between getting feedback, right? Because we definitely want to get feedback on about the work breakdown structure. We also want to get people to say, hey, I'm interested in being a lead or participating in this particular area, so that we can get some. Then we may want to, what else we want to cover,
well,
Reg?
this is a little bit of an administrative thing. If you continue to use your GoToWebinar control panel, you can enter in things that you're interested in. It'll automatically map it to you. So if you have a category of something that you want to get involved in and you're concerned that we may not know who you are and we're trying to be polite and not asking every time, you can go ahead and just log in just enter in your information. You can see there on the example slide, enter in what it is you're interested in and things like that, and we'll make sure that automatically gets associated with you. So in addition to the conversation that we've opened the mic up for, you have the opportunity to make sure that you're designating what you're interested in. If that makes sense. Okay, so the microphones all should be, so everything should be up and running, and hopefully you've used the phone number at the top of your slide there to call in, and we're going to move back down to the other slides.
Reg, well, just before we go ahead.
So we have 5 people dialed in to the conversation. So everyone else on the webinar should be able to continue to hear the conversation. They can provide the feedback through the texting, the messaging, but they won't be able to contribute verbally.
Okay, so I don't know if you were able to hear that or not. There's right now about 5 people that are signed in via the phone number. And so you'll be able to still hear their questions and the discussion via the webinar interface, but you will not be able to ask a question. So if you are interested in having some dialogue, you really need to dial in to do that, or you can electronically enter in things that you're interested in and ask questions electronically in the GoToWebinar panel.
And Reg, before we dive into the verbal detailed discussion, there is one question up there that I'd like to get some clarification on, which is how do you sign up?
Right.
So if people are interested out there and they're not verbally on the teleconference and say, yes, I want to be a lead or a participant on this, what's the process to get them slotted into one of the team organizational structures?
Yeah, and that's
a question to you. What is it?
Yeah, and that was what I was just talking about. On the fields in the GoToWebinar control panel, you can designate what you want to be involved in.
Okay, great.
Or you can, and that way we know for sure it doesn't get lost in all the stuff that's going on here. We know for sure that you're really interested in these areas.
And then we'll follow up with the sign-up sheet.
That's correct.
So we're going to then send out the sign-up sheet, which was the last slide we showed, saying, hey, here's where people are participating. Send it in again. So this isn't your only chance to sign up. But we're looking to get people signed up today. I mean, that was an intent of this meeting, was, hey, here's a work breakdown structure. Get some input into it. Let's get some bodies on it, because to try to schedule it is senseless until we know who's doing, who we have to work on it in what area. Good idea.
Okay, so calling back down to
Which one?
His last slide, discussion topics. The WBS slide.
Oh,
We've gotten a number of emails from the Building Smart Alliance folks, and clearly they're pointing to a lot of touch points that have already taken place in hand holding going forward. And so that's a separate activity we'll take with you, Bob. Appreciate all your feedback, and we'll push forward on that. So do you want to take it from here? Talk about-
Yeah, and so, feel free to go ahead. Dan, you've got something to add?
I've got a question for you. Based on the way the org chart is set up, we come down and we split in between the process and also in industrial. people call it.
Industrial, commercial.
Yeah.
The
So
split
how?
between that, or institutional, commercial, industrial versus institutional, commercial.
Right.
Yeah. So how do we see that? We got those two groups. So how do we find how are the AIM 1, 2, 3s divvied up? Are they the same under both of those categories, or are we looking for?
We haven't made a final decision on that, and I think we need to decide that, if not today, in the next day or two. That's an open question. And there was significant feedback from some of the lead members already signed up that if we try to do both at the same time with the same group, we're just going to be talking past each other in terms of language and process. So it's been suggested that we would actually, say, okay, this is in a sense, in fact, I'm not sure it would be so much mirrored in B, but maybe both A and B need to be mirrored between here's industrial, here's building. So there's kind of like a B industrial and a B building. I don't know if building's the right word for it, but Todd, what's your opinion? You've had a little bit of both, of flavor of both.
Yeah. Well, the you do have the issues where the terminology and everything's quite a bit different. The systems are definitely different in a lot of cases. Although I will have to say that recently, like last year or two, some of the systems are becoming the same again. So, but
systems as in applications.
Yeah, applications.
Software
Yeah,
applications.
right. But the terminology is different. On one side we're talking AEC language, where on the other side we're talking EPC language. So.
Right.
And do we view that so I agree the terminology, but is the functionality different? Or is functionality basically break down to the same thing, i.e. trades?
Can we verify you're able to hear us? Could someone talk into their phone and let us know that you're able to hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Sorry.
So it's the but the functionality is basically the same, isn't it?
I think overall, yes, I would have to say. I think there may be, for the most part, yes.
But I agree with Ted that A and B definitely probably would be split into A1, B1.
Yeah.
And then the final report would be the final report for both sectors.
Right. I agree. Yeah, you can't.
Okay.
There's no way you can do them together.
Yeah, so as we're forming the teams, would like to get, particularly my sense from the initial representation was we had a larger participation among industrial, but we do have a pretty sizable chunk of people on the institutional building side.
Yeah, and I'm here participating for the institutional building
exactly.
side.
So I think it's like as we get teams going, and it's really sub teams under there. Todd, you may help us in terms of collecting up the ammunition of personnel and what the interest areas are among the institutional commercial side. But I think it's something that we don't want to overly mix the teams at the working group level down at that level. And as we go through, I think our phase one, we're going to get a sense for, are they really that disconnected, or did we get some high value in terms of, we had two groups that at the end of the day could have hit up the same issue. But you take an example of like the materials management. The reality is in today's environment, there's not many material management systems used on building institutional projects because it's like pushed down to the subcontractor level, not done by the general contractor yet. That's kind of like a difference in the industry workflows.
Yep.
And so there's some workflows that are going to definitively be industrial plant, but we may find them all on somewhere some overlap. But right now, let's go down the path of separating them out and make it.
I was just going to say, and it may be after some period of time they meet together and find that it makes sense for us to continue this separate paths, or what we're doing is really all the same.
Exactly.
We could be together.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. And that's kind of what I was saying.
make that decision on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Reevaluate
it at the end of phase one and say, do we bring them together, or is it continue down the path of separate?
Or we might just find that there's certain areas that are, and then there's other areas that there's just no way that are ever going to come.
Right. But you could make that in at that 2 dot or 3 dot level, you can make that decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say that, that one slide you had where you had the team members and then the all the different signups as to which one you want to go into. We need to expand that out to industrial or
Correct.
commercial buildings.
Right. I agree.
Okay.
For each.
Yeah, and I think with Building Smart Alliance, we had a number of emails in from them. I think that they'd be real, I can't speak for them obviously, but my hopes are and expectations are that they would be very interested in advancing the commercial side in lockstep with us. And
Right.
you can do a comparison between does this apply or not, and if you push it aside, at least you know why it doesn't apply. And if it does apply and you hadn't thought about it before, then you can embrace it and bring it into the industrial and vice versa.
Right.
Well, we see we got one person, John Goyen, who I know personally, before he left, said, hey, I'm signing up as a reviewer. So cha-ching, ring the bell one time. We got somebody signing up.
Now, just while people are thinking perhaps about what they might be interested in participating in and things like that, just FYI, what we'll do is this presentation in PowerPoint form is fairly large. It's over 10 meg. We are going to put it on the FIATEC members only side, and as well as folks that sign up for the AIM team, that'll be on the AIM project side as well. And so we really don't generally distribute full contact information openly to people because we just don't want our members or anyone else for that matter to be burdened with a bunch of emails. And so that information of who the contacts are and what they're involved in and what their projects are would be delineated in the members only side of FIATEC. And so you'll still have access to that as also we'll be tracking project status reports and things like that. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but we'll be taking Ted's presentation today and translating it into our project plan. So that'll also be available on our members only site. So there will be threads and traceabilities all the way back so that you can have anyone who comes on board later or yourself review that information to come up to speed on what you want to do. So with respect to the sign-up sheet, it's going to be a living document. So different people are going to be responsible for different areas, but our hopes are, and I don't know that we'll be successful, is to get principal leads in both the industrial and the commercial side for each one of these elements, like AIM-1 and AIM-2. I'm not sure if people are in a position to do that. We've provided you the background, so I guess I'm putting it on the table now to see what areas do you be interested in being involved in, not just reviewing, but actually being perhaps the lead or certainly a subject matter expert. So if you can email in, or excuse me, respond back to the webinar control panel of what you'd like to be involved in if you don't want to talk or can't talk, or if you want to talk on the phone right now, that's what we're looking for.
And we may want to pull the trick that my old high school teacher did, which is the students don't put up, the hand. You start asking.
Well,
Let's go down through the list. I mean, we really need to get some level of who's going to commit to do what,
well,
because
and
if we're
also,
standing
wasn't there
around
a
and
slide in the preview deck that talked about level of commitment, how many hours a week, something like that. Do we still have that slide?
Yes.
No,
Oh, I'm just saying
Yeah.
for people
Yeah.
who are looking.
this was
at
kind of the idea of
commitment,
what we had, because I think that's a key issue, Jen, is like, well,
for
what am I
people
really
to
getting into?
understand. Right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
what I thought was, look, trying to meet more often than once every other week, but you probably take a little bit of homework coming out of the meeting. The breakout teams as we get them, so we'd have a AIM 1.1 that'd look at it and go 1.0, hey, let's focus on this functional case first, and maybe you need to bite off one, right? Pick the highest priority one, bite it off, and then what we're suggesting is having a working session, not meeting a webinar where somebody just presents. Have a working session. It can be online. Online working session to start breaking it out, taking some assignments away, come back 2 weeks later, assemble it, review what you've got, and iterate. So we're suggesting 2 hours every other week with, I don't know what the homework would end up being. Maybe you could say an additional 2 hours, maybe 4 hours, 2, maybe 3. If you think that's too much, looking for some feedback. It's been 10 years since I participated in a FIATEC project. I'll state that. So Todd and Dan may provide a little bit more input. Is that a reasonable amount of time? Then at the management level, we're going to meet every 3 to 4 weeks, as well as have some participation in these subgroups. Certainly, I'm going to be heavily participating and engaging a little bit in almost every subgroup to provide some consistency and alignment between them. But we're going to be rolling up information, seeing how it's going, and adjusting as necessary. Then we're suggesting 2 integrated team workshops. Ideally this could have been one of them, but it wasn't scheduled in time. So we're thinking June and September. We'd have let's get together. We'd have still some remote participation, but they're again maybe intended to be half-day workshops where maybe a day-long workshop may be better. I don't know. I mean, CII really drives commitment to get people together for a couple of days. I think that's a little heavy, maybe perhaps for what we're doing, but I think that's one of the things, Reg, we need to granularize. And then we're gonna in the September workshop would be heavily towards making sure we're ready to present in our October 7th, 8th meeting. And based upon our resource commitment, how much we present is really going to depend upon how many people we get involved in, the breakout teams at the end of the day. Management team will kind of take the approach on the presentation, prepping it up. Anybody in the breakout team that wants to jump in and help, fantastic. But it's really going to be the commitment at that breakout team level that's going to make a decisive aspect of how far we get.
Based on this idea and the idea that there would be good team members, I'm willing to do the 2.0 materials management industrial if you're looking for people.
Fantastic. That's what we're looking for. Okay.
And I'll take the completions lead
Okay.
for on the industrial side.
Reg, are somebody cranking capturing this, or should I take notes on it?
Commitments fall away in 90 seconds. You got to write it down.
Exactly.
Just see if you can
Jen
log
was
this.
2.0. Dan, you were 5.0.
He was
This is Mike Mosley with Zachary Industrial. I'll take on 3.0.
And are all of these at this point in the I category as opposed to the C category?
Yep. So far we're all industrial.
You got Dale Adcock up here signed up for field execution.
Dell, is that as a lead or as a participant?
Oh, the spreadsheet.
Do you have it in Excel?
Well, he
You were
has.
filling out the spreadsheet on Ted's laptop, so you aren't seeing it on your screen. We'll distribute that once we get the.
Well, Todd, I gave that was the sheet I gave you. If you want to pop it open, sure. And start putting the names.
Oh, okay.
In. It's not the slide, but I gave you an Excel spreadsheet.
That's better.
It had every name I could gather that attended a webinar before or this meeting. So you actually have probably more names than what we got as participants. Is there an Excel there? Didn't copy it on?
Hi there, this is Shiva Krishnasan from
I'm looking
Bechtel.
for it. Is
I'll
it this
take
one right here?
the field execution
I got it.
and completion.
Excellent.
We're running parallel here. Todd's finding the.
So Shiva, is that so? You're on two teams, which is good because again, I think we don't have to drive yourself just into one. Am I assuming you're a participant on those as opposed to a lead?
Well, I like to lead the completion one and participate in field execution.
I think Dan signed up for lead, but there's no need. I mean, to say there's not two leads is fine. Let's get two of them. You guys can work hand in hand.
Well, if we already have a lead, then I'll go with participant.
No, I think
That's good
two's
as
better.
well.
I think two's better. I mean,
Yeah.
as Reg is saying, we're not say there's just one lead. It's probably good to have two people that in an area are kind of saying, hey, we're the Tiger team that's taking it on, right?
Well, we all have day
And,
jobs, so.
Yeah.
And other note, I also like to participate on the cause because earlier in the presentation you did mention that we are planning to do 4D, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that
because
was slotted
in my
under number
company, we are
3.0.
venturing into 4D world, so I like to involve in that.
Yeah. So maybe you're a participant on the 3.0 as well because that's a big cross as well. I mean, that has a high overlap with the field execution as you go beyond the
Okay,
kind
so
of the schedule integration level.
so can we start updating
Right.
it?
Yeah. These have
So
what
line
number?
30, Jen Rizzo is me.
Okay, hey, bear with us. You can see it on your screen, the different
So,
folks. So we're just trying to catch the
2.0
tiger by
on the
the
industrial
tail
side.
here.
Just put an X.
Lead.
I.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'll participate on 3.0.
I means.
Industrial.
Oh, I
Industrial
see.
vice commercial.
Okay, so there's indications with I in commercial, so Jen's industrial.
Yeah, and so then to go down, we had
Bill
Dan
Adcox. He's not.
and Shiva on. Probably do a search.
I'm up there toward the top. I thought.
Yeah, it's right
Yeah,
there.
Dan.
Okay, put me as support on 3 industrial. support on 4,
No, I think you're gonna be co-field execution, right?
No, he was going to lead 5.
No, he's
and then
leaving
5, 5 I'll
Co-lead.
lead.
Yeah.
And then put me as a support reviewer. And I'll support the guide.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
great.
So go back to the guide.
Now that's what I'm talking about. Not everybody may sign up to Dan's level of commitment, but that's okay. But we're looking for that.
So we're trying, this is we still need Dale.
Well, before we had Mike Mosley
Okay,
Yeah,
let's
Mike
get
Mosley.
was going to lead 3.0. Your name may not be on here. Apologize. This was some version of the
Last
sign-up
minute.
sheet.
Whoops. Did you see it? No.
Will this Excel file will be shared among us?
Yeah. So after this, we're going to send it back out and try to recruit additional people that couldn't attend. So this will be shared within a day or so for us
Yeah,
to
as
send
soon
it
as
out.
the webinar is made available on our website, we'll reference the webinar, we'll provide the PDF again, we'll revise the PDF with the comments like with respect to scaffolding and special equipment and things like that, and distribute a PDF of that, and then also distribute this spreadsheet. So hang on.
What was Dale? What was
Dale's wants to sign up for the.
Dale's probably not on the list.
he
I thought I
was.
saw him up there.
He's on there. Right there.
There he is.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, you're on Jerome's
Yeah,
line.
yeah. He was for the
Yeah,
Industrial.
that was Dale
right there.
Industrial.
So did Dale sign up as a lead or
field
a
execution.
Dale,
supporting
it's
role?
unclear if you are going to support it or be a lead.
Dale, unless you speak up, you're going to be dominated as a lead.
He said leader.
He wants to support, he also wants to support AIM 1 and 3.
Okay, so he's going to
Okay,
support.
so
one
he's
and
going to
three.
be a
Great.
leader. He wants to be leader on the.
No, he said support. Support 1 and 3.
Yeah.
But
So I think we got to put him as a support on 1.
Yeah.
There you go. And then he said he's going to support 3, and lead 4.
Yeah, and
Great.
lead 4.
Awesome. And then we had Shiva, who was going to support or lead 5, be a co-lead on 5 and support 4. Now we're looking for more.
And also
There-
support in the 3.0.
On which one? I'm sorry. What was she?
He's support 3, support 4, and lead on 5.
You got it right.
Awesome. Well, we still got 30 people on the call that haven't dropped out.
That's good.
That's awesome. Yeah. If you're not committed, we got a category for you. You don't have to commit right now. We got those type of folks that aren't yet ready to step into the.
Tanis volunteered.
Fire.
You see this, Todd, where Tanis volunteered to be a participant in field execution as a reviewer
No, and a reviewer.
and a reviewer. Excuse me.
So put her as support on 4 and support on reviewer.
Okay.
I don't know if you see her there. Our list is a little bit was just from this yesterday morning. So if you signed up
We gotta add
recently,
Tanis.
you didn't make
Okay.
it.
He's what?
TANNIS.
Oh, N.
2 ends.
Okay.
And I know Tanis. I'll add her name later.
Okay. Okay.
So she was support on 4 and support on the reviewer, which was the next to last column, I think.
Industrial again?
Yes, we need some C's, don't we?
Yeah. I'll add some C's on my name, but I'll
Yeah, and Tanis is a great asset
do it.
because she was heavily involved in the COA development of the COA work-based planning model.
Good.
Okay.
So Martin, where do you want us to put you up at the top when we get to it?
Well,
No?
yeah, I mean, I guess we can jump in and have, I put the management team. We're just kind of like the team at the management
Okay.
level. And if you want to jump in at a working level, that's fine too.
Well, I think from a working level, that I'm quite happy to lead number one actually. I
Fantastic.
don't think you've got a lead there on I.
Martin, aye.
Gotcha.
So we got Dale, right? And then,
Okay, we have Mario. I see Mario down there. We didn't capture him.
Hi, this is Shiva from Bechtel again. Could you please add me to the first one as well, engineering, because that's going to drive to the whole diagram, right?
Sure. Yeah, great.
As a support.
Said Martin. Who else was there? There's somebody else
Is that
we
it?
need to
Oh, I'm
add,
sorry.
or,
yeah,
I think Mario is not on the list to begin with.
oh, he's not on, okay.
So we got Mario willing to be a reviewer.
Okay. Sure, not.
TikTok. How much time do we have
Greg,
left?
what do you do if they're not a member?
yeah, we have to
look at that.
look at that. There's this balance between subject matter expertise and whether or not, to what extent your projects and things like that capitalize on it. The dilemma we have is that we try to keep from divulging too much stuff publicly while we're working through these projects because it inhibits people from being very candid. Because as you might imagine, these working groups get very active and sometimes even loud. And generally, we'd like to keep that under the umbrella of FIATEC. And I talked about the antitrust implications and so on like that. So, clearly, I guess what I can do is I can follow up with the various folks that expressed an interest and talk to them on a one-by-one basis about whether or not FIATEC membership makes sense.
Okay. Recruiting. Come on, it's great.
Yeah.
You can always back out.
Well, I have some folks in my organization that aren't on that list, but would be good subject matter experts, and so I'll get with them and provide that feedback.
Yeah.
So and maybe that should be a takeaway for all of us. If we know someone within
Sure.
our
Yeah,
company
exactly.
Yeah.
that would be a good fit, we should add them.
Yeah, and if you're maybe thinking about it and would like to talk with me some more, I open that. I'm welcome to that type of dialogue. If you're, we're gonna be trying to recruit additional membership after this. So please, if you don't do it now, just let us know if we should stop knocking on your door. And you're always welcome to, listen in on other webinars. So it doesn't stop you from, looking at the results. But we want to try to batten down the hatches over the next week on who's participating, get the meetings rolling. So if you're interested but not yet sure and want some more conversation, say
So-
not yet committed. And that basically means you can plan on us following up with you to try to see if it's a fit for you or not. You can always sign up, and if it turns out that it's just too much time or doesn't jive with your interest, you could back out. I don't think there's an issue of saying you want to do something and back out. Although if you're not really sure, don't sign up as a lead.
Yeah, and Black and Beach indicated that they'd like to look at the spreadsheet and give us names for participation points. And I think that's the major takeaway that you're getting at as well.
Yeah.
So we'll send the information to you, Paul. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, but so let's set a date of when we want people to submit names. We don't want to just let
That's
it
right.
drift on.
Right.
So
You got a holiday coming up, so.
yeah, that's true.
So I say by like next Wednesday.
I would say Friday, because I mean, a
I
lot of
think
people aren't gonna be back in the office until at
Till
least
Tuesday.
Tuesday, and then they're gonna be talking about what they did on the holiday, so.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think
Hey, we
Friday.
need to get some more efficiency in here.
So
I would
Friday.
say Friday.
What we'll do on Friday is I'll send an email out to everyone that's on our contact list now. I'll reference this webinar, which should be posted by then. And I'll also provide the PDF of the revised slides as well as this table, and request that you identify subject matter experts and areas that you're interested in, and encourage you to listen to the video.
And that's this Friday.
This,
And then the
this- not
sign
this
up
Friday, no,
is the following Friday.
that's not tomorrow. It's a week from tomorrow.
You'll post the information.
It'll be consistent with how fast Viatech works.
Yeah.
I expect it'll be posted by
Okay.
Wednesday.
But we're going to send the sign up sheet out sooner
Well, it depends on.
so that then
because-
people can get signed up by next Friday.
Well, I don't know, but there's out of the 90 or 85 people that indicated an interest, we only had half of that show up.
That's all right.
So we have to give them a starting point as well.
Okay.
So
Well, we should aim for next Friday then.
that's right.
If you've got stragglers after that, that's fine. But if
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you
That's what
can
I'm
get
saying.
your core group,
Yeah.
your
It'll go, not this Friday, but the week from Friday.
Right, but that's when we want to get commitment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anybody that's going to, like with the Black Beach, I think it's great. Like a lot of people are probably going to take it away, try to recruit some people within their organization, get them signed up by next Friday.
Well, what we can do is that it'll be a while before I get the report from the webinar, but I can send the spreadsheet to you early, or if that makes sense.
I think that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying earlier, let's send the slide deck again, along with the sign up sheet, and say sign up by next Friday. Here it is.
All right.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait for it to be officially posted.
Okay, and then
on
I'll
the
just make
Viatech.
mention of when the
Yeah.
webinar will be posted.
That's right.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me see if there's any more questions. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to
Todd, we just
email
need to put a
me.
note in there
Uh,
to put I or C, what they indicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Todd, do you want to bring up our
Yeah, we'll put
contact
that in the
information?
instructions email.
It's the last slide in the deck.
Oh, sure.
So just a second more here. The last slide. So hopefully by now you know how to reach me. Here's my email address. My phone number is
There
my
you
phone
go.
number is 512-992-8328, or you can reach Ted. So this is the contact information you'll need, but you've seen emails along these lines. And so here's, I guess, the final action items. We'll send you the spreadsheet. We'll modify it a little bit for the I's and C's and things like that. We'll send you the spreadsheet now. We'll make reference to the fact that the webinar will be available on the Viatech site, and we'll modify the webinar and send you a PDF of that along with the spreadsheet by this Friday. And we're hoping to get all your feedback by the end of the next week. Let's see, if there's any more questions, the phones are still on, or else you can still use the GoToWebinars to enter a question. I really appreciate all the participation. Looking forward to this project. I think it's very important. Closing comments.
No, it's great. I'm really glad we've got some eyes going up on that screen.
No, I think it's great. I think we've got some traction. I think we've got a
I'll
plan
put
now
some Cs.
compared to where we were. So I think it's, we're moving forward. And I think if everyone can, as you say, go away and go back to your own organisation and then promote it,
Right.
then we can gather some more experts.
Yeah, and back to the Viatech membership, what happens is you get incremental benefits. Being a member, you can kind of see where things are going, and you can start capitalizing on things earlier and harvesting it. So I think that's very important. And so what's also important is that there's so many people that are interested in work-based planning and work packaging and things like that, that you have a lot of internal motivation to advance this and make this successful, and we have a lot of motivation to make you successful. So it's a very synergistic relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say though, I think we prefer people to be members.
Yes.
Because does that tie people into the Viatech confidentiality clause?
Yes, it protects them.
Right.
Right.
And I think that protects everyone else that is a member if there's people floating
Exactly.
outside it.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know if you were able to hear that well. I would hope so. But basically what Martin Wischel is saying is that we'd prefer you to be members because that provides everyone with the umbrella of protection. And it clearly allows us to be very open and candid about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the opportunities are. So if you want to discuss that further, I'll be happy to discuss that with you on a one-on-one basis. I think that's it. I really appreciate you all calling in. Hopefully you found it productive. This is not a trivial problem.
Yeah, and thanks to Mark and Martin for letting us host it here at the Shell facility. It's been great. Thank you, Mark.
Great. Thank you. That's the end of the webinar. Take care.